Awesome. Alexandra, then, how did you come to think about this document, that you had some locations in? What was the purpose? You were trying to experiment, validate, the startup you're working with in some way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's coming from my background as an intelligence officer, always kind of a dreaming of these solutions to process unstructured data in a smart way. Mm-hmm. And just realize that, well, of course you can ask questions and then you can ask questions about the text. Mm-hmm. But what if you can ask ChatGPT to actually extract structured data out of it? And since, a lot of formats are text-based, of course, we can...
Is it the most common format, I believe, that most companies have in textual format?
Which one?
Text format.
Yeah, exactly.
If you compare it to structured or images or audio, whatnot. Then
I guess there are lots of objects, but of course there's a lot more content when it comes to video. So, we have a lot of video content
data
today.
Size-wise, yeah.
But it's also, I think it's a consumer versus enterprise thing. So on the consumer side, it's a huge amount of video, right, of YouTube and everything else. Yeah. But on the enterprise side, the for some strange reason, I think the number of videos is not that prevalent. What do you say? It's prevalent, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is a shame, I think, because video is a great. Yes. Anyway. So I was giving this lecture the day after, and I was thinking, we have integrated ChatGPT 3.5 in our app. So I thought, what else could we do? And then, of course, I need to demo how you can extract GeoJSON, a special format to extract and form kind of outline coordinates, and tell ChatGPT to do that, and then just paste that into a GeoJSON viewer, so I can get all these locations on a map. And it turned out, if you kind of follow the structured approach to saying, hey, can you extract locations out of this? And then can you turn those locations into coordinates? And then I specified it because I'm a nerd. So I specified it in lat long VGS84 because that's a good coordinate system that we need to use. And then I said, I want the output to be GeoJSON only. And then I got the features.
So what was the specific prompt? Did you have the document first and then you asked in the end, can you please find the locations, or what was the last part?
Yeah, so it's a combination of what the question is and what the user content is in terms of the actual prompt. So the prompt, of course, contains the document. So we have extracted a document out of HTML or the text out of HTML. So we can just input that in our app, and then we have a step-by-step instruction basically. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then do this, and then. On top of that, I add the question, which I insert at the last part of the prompt, which is, can you find all the coordinates in this article? So I realize if I specify the question that the user sees, the user only sees the question. We only know the prompt, so they don't see the prompt.
This is kind of, the difficulty in this is, for one, I guess, to locate, where are the locations in the text itself, names of cities or whatnot. Yeah. But then, in some way, it needs to know the coordinates of it. How did it find the coordinates, you think?
Interesting. I guess it knows where specific countries and cities are. So for cities, it shows the kind of middle point. So it shows them, this is the middle of this, I think it was Kharkiv. So it took Kharkiv in the middle of Kharkiv, and then that's it. Some other part, it got wrong. So the bridge, down in Crimea, it actually located inside the Crimean Peninsula.
So that was slightly wrong then.
And then I said it to it, well, you actually positioned it wrongly, and then it changed it to a place in the water.
Oh. Okay.
So you can actually have a discussion about the location being wrong, which was also so I guess you can also either choose to manually change it, use a geolookup service, or have a discussion to make it kind of understand the context even better. So I thought that was amazing, because that realizes anything you can output as a structured text format, you can sort of prompt it to do that. Of course, with some likelihood that it will do it differently, which means I saw other people who need to specify the key names in a JSON file specifically, because otherwise it chooses different key names. So if you process it, it fails. But if you ask it, I want these keys, then it also becomes more kind of repeatable.
I think these kind of gold nuggets of how you can use and apply GPT is so interesting, and you don't think of all the applications, but that it can simply do all these kind of tasks without having been trained for it specifically.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's really go in general, I think. Yeah. Would you agree?
Fully agree.
And Luka, you had some interesting case as well. Can you just elaborate a bit more? You compared the different models in some way.
Yes. So there was this problem that ChatGPT failed on, and I wanted to see if GPT4 would handle it. And basically, it goes like blank blank.
And do you write blank blank in the prompt, or
underscores?
Underscores.
Okay. Yes. Is an animal that begins with the same letter as the capital of France. And GPT-4 confidently answers ferret, which of course isn't correct. It should be an animal starting with P. Now, two interesting things. One was that I mentally made, when I first saw that problem, for a millisecond, I made the same mistake. Sort of, I was searching for an animal starting with F. And I guess sort of when you have a capital F in France, that sort of association. But the second interesting bit is if you instead ask it the same question and then tell it, don't write the answer first, write reason through it step by step.
Right. So you added additional like chain of thought prompting to it or something.
Exactly. And then it says, oh, the capital of France is Paris. I'm looking for an animal with P, like penguin. Penguin is the answer. And I've discovered that in many cases, it sort of helps letting it reason it out, essentially think out loud.
Yeah, right.
Which again, isn't so different from the way that we do when we're solving something more complex.
And you said reason, some people that are type Gary Marcus kind of person wouldn't say that GPT reason. Do you think GPT reasons?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. It will be a problem on this panel, the idea that we're going to have a panel about, GPT-4 and ChatGPT and Bard and perhaps ErnieBot and all these kind of models that has been released in the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, we are a bit too much into agreement, I think, how they work. So we'll have to struggle a bit about, disagreeing a bit.
Are you sure? I mean, I'm sure we're pretty much not aligned on like we'll fight whether the singularity will occur in 2030 or 2035.
Yeah, exactly. 2032 or 33, who knows? And awesome. So let me just recap a bit. So you were asking it a rather difficult, like logical question in some way. First it failed, but by simply asking it to think more,
exactly,
it solved it in some way.
Exactly. And when you ask it to generate code, it usually helps asking it to do a pseudocode version first, like logical steps. Right. Then it tends to get things more right than just the bat.
Yeah. It also seems that you can actually do Python code to do it, and then that is a good step also to make it kind of reason through math problems and that kind of stuff. So
I'm thinking if we should add this topic later, but some people argue at least that ChatGPT or the GPT 3.5 datasets that they used contained so much more code and tasks to be able to reason about code made the reasoning ability so much higher also for natural language, simply because understanding code requires the models to learn how to reason much more, right?
It sounds like a plausible hypothesis.
Cool.
But in the original sort of these are all transformer-based models, and in the original paper, when it explains the core functionality, they say like, we don't really, this works really well. We don't really know why, so we attribute it to benevolence of the gods.
Who are the gods then? That's very interesting.
Exactly. I spoke with a person, when we talk about these models, and at the end of the day they bullshit also with high confidence. And somebody said they're either spooky or kooky. So spooky is when they are bullshitting with high confidence, and that's naturally when we all get these debates about regulation and how we should handle these models, because they can say stuff with high confidence and the majority of people will believe it. Then kooky is when they clearly say something wrong, and you laugh about it. And I think it's still important to remember that at the end of the day, these are transformer-based models that Google came out with in 2017. They're indexing a large amount of text. And what are they trained to do? Well, guess the next word. So at the end of the day, like we talked a bit about the AGI before here, but these models are not trained to do human reasoning.
Then, yes, okay, that's an interesting topic. I think. I think we should have a topic about how is the reasoning different when it comes to human brains versus GPT or AI in general. I think that could be an interesting topic, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And also a hybrid AI.
And I saw from Luke already, he didn't agree. So we can disagree. I'm trying to,
I think that's the sort of, that's the vector, the predicting the next word. That's the sort of mechanism it uses. But I think the astonishing fact is that it learned Python in order to predict the next word.
Yeah.
Meaning that it learned a bunch of stuff just to be able to solve that very simple task.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Oliver, you also had an interesting story, I think, and it's not perhaps GPT related, but for a very personal task. Right?
So I'm getting married in August, and I like design also a lot. Besides technology and AI, ML, and data, I like actually design. So I wanted to design our invitation card for the wedding. So this was back in October. So DALL-E had just been published. I tried it out. I thought it was pretty cool, but I had to wrangle it quite a lot or do some prompt engineering to get the output.
And perhaps for people that may not be as knowledgeable or technical, DALL-E was also an open AI model, but it wasn't generating text. It actually generated images.
Images, right? Exactly. Text to image with prompts.
Yes.
And it's a bit like Google searching. Like you need to be very good at making these prompts to get the image you want and get the certain, vibe in that image.
You have to be a proper prompt engineer.
Exactly, and everybody can Google prompt engineering. It's actually becoming a real job right now. And this is a micro example of prompt engineering. And I got at the end of the day, after some wrangling on prompt engineering, I got the image and the vibe I wanted for our wedding. And we utilized that image in the invitations. And then a week back, I tried Midjourney's V5, so version 5, which is the latest and greatest text-to-image model, and it was mind-blowing. It was scary. Like the results were so realistic. The previous models had a lot of problems with faces, with hands, fingers especially, but this model, like I saw people producing images where it looked like Donald Trump is getting arrested, and the images looked really realistic. And I guess the learning or the story here is more about the exponentiality that we discussed about in the development. So between October and March, I used the service. It took 5 months for that service to exponentially improve.
Right.
And it's a bit like Drive to Survive, the Netflix series, Formula One series. It feels like, something is coming out every week, not every month, which it is based on the news naturally. But I thought it was pretty mind-opening to understand that, what we're doing now, today, might feel really cool, but...
Imagine tomorrow.
Yeah, imagine after the summer.
And now we're seeing video coming, which is amazing. So
we also have we had GPT4 with us here. Do you have any suggestion for some question to ask it? What should it be? Anyone that comes up with a creative question? This is really hard. Do you have anything? Kirill is behind the keyboard here.
Ask it what question we should ask.
Yeah. What is surprising about GPT-4? If you ask it that.
And add, write it as a limerick. That was the GPT-3 party trick. You could ask it to summarize anything as a limerick, and it usually was very hilarious, sort of the results. Of course, now with both ChatGPT and GPT-4, they are much, much better at...
GPT-4. Oops. It's a new keyboard. Okay, not as a limerick, but we'll take that one. We ask that a second question then, to rephrase this as a limerick then.
In
Swedish. Coming in
of course, you know that GPT-4 doesn't know it's GPT-4. It thinks it's ChatGPT.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that. Oh. Okay. It's surprisingly slow. It's slower, right? GPT-4 is slower than ChatGPT, if I...
Yes, then the turbo model. Yes, of course. If you use the API, it's faster, but not orders of magnitude faster.
And this is actually a very good introduction to the next topic. We were planning to ask, what really a GPT-4 is and how it compares to ChatGPT, but we basically have the answers here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they seem to have updated. So the first when it first came out a couple of days ago, it was very certain about it being ChatGPT and was denying any knowledge of GPT-4.
But they are updating it more or less continuously, right? Or at least every week or something.
They are. The question is when they said that the cutoff is in 2021, how true is that?
That was GPT-3.
GPT-4 also
okay,
the same cutoff.
Okay, I didn't know that. But they're using human-in-loop reinforcement learning. For GPT-4 also. Yeah, of course.
So that could be improving at least, or they can be using the questions that they have been fed to it, and then perhaps
ask it which version it is.
Oh,
so this might be also a case that it's actually shamelessly lying.
So which version?
It's spooky.
Which version of GPT are you? Could you ask it? GPT are you? Good.
What you, Oliver, called spooky and kooky, they usually say that it's shameless.
Scroll down. Yeah.
I think when it's
that's
there we go.
And it says it's for people that may not see the screen. The answer is it says it's ChatGPT, but we actually are using GPT-4. Okay, it says it is a GPT-4 architecture.
So it actually knows the combo that it is a product called ChatGPT, and then I have different models.
Interesting. So this has been updated lately, meaning that the statement there that the knowledge cutoff is September 2021 is.
Or they added some manual data sets or topics. Yeah. Can you ask? Please describe the architecture of GPT-4.
So for those who don't know, it's OpenAI has not released.
And it's very annoying, right? That they
closed AI.
I'm not as annoyed. I mean, it's a transformer model. It's sort of none of them have been particularly brilliant architecturally. It's just size. Of course, the multimodal aspect is interesting, but I'm more interested in what have they primed it on? What's the sort of instructions?
Does it have 10 trillion parameters?
What do you think about that, by the way? Do you think GPT-4 is about the same size as ChatGPT, or do you think
GPT-3?
3.5. Yeah,
3.5. I think it's close, a bit bigger maybe, but it's not about the parameter size, in my opinion, at least.
I think the Alpaca model shows that it's really not about that these are super inefficiently stored.
Yeah.
So if they found a better way to optimally train them, then it could be the same size.
Yeah. And it's not giving us a very informative answer. It's using transformers.
Yes.
No shit.
Yeah.
And some data. Yeah. I didn't expect us to get a perfect answer here. Awesome. I think it's time also, and we have the topic about Alpaca for people that don't know what it is, but we will get back to that shortly. But before that, perhaps we can just do a quick round of introductions here. And Alexandra, can you start and just give a brief introduction to who you are?
Sure. My name is Alexandra. So I have a long background from the Swedish Armed Forces as an intelligence officer for over 20 years. So my kind of red thread have been in how do you use information to understand the world around us? That's basically my thing. So that's why I also got a political science degree. That's why I think media production is interesting. So I used to do that in the days. That's why I ended up, in the R&D part of the armed forces to kind of not just do the analysis, but figure out how to do the analysis. So I like to combine both the technology and the methodology of doing the analysis. So I think that's, and then I left the armed forces. So I got onto the civilian darkness, as you say in the armed forces.
Civilian darkness?
Yeah, that's what they say. Okay. So I ended up being a kind of a digitalization advisor and chief information architect at Combitech. And then I found that I have this really kind of unsolved ideas in my head that I tried to solve in the armed forces, where I was fortunate enough to build a concept lab for developing the next generation intelligence analysis. And we did it in an open activity. So we did it with a lot of commercial companies. Mm-hmm. And I felt, well, the whole cloud revolution, the whole AI revolution, we could do this in the cloud completely differently, but not sell it to the armed forces, but instead giving it to journalists, risk analysts, NGOs, researchers, everybody who has this task of, taking lots amount of text and turning it into insights, basically. And I think the final touch was when I had the privilege to do a TED Talk here in Stockholm. So then I kind of realized when I got into that kind of circus, you get a personal speaker coach. And that speaker coach kind of showed me the importance of turning your insights into a good story. And I felt, well, of course, I realized that AI is now being used by publishers to find story arcs in text. So they can analyze manuscripts using AI, which means that we could probably also support people of turning their brilliant insights also into a good story. So we can kind of help them through not only the analysis part, but also the delivery part.
Right.
So that's the thinking of Parse, to kind of try to help people tie those things together. One is very technical, very analytical, and the other is more creative and focused on the delivery. So I think that's the unique sauce.
And you have some startups now as well, right?
Yeah. So there's a company called Parsed. So we are launching the first couple of the test users in a couple of weeks here. So that would be amazing to see what people actually do.
Parsed without a D.
Yeah, Parsed. So
with
five
T,
letter.
or is it
Parse? D like in Delta. So yeah. So
looking forward to that.
Yeah.
That will be fun. Awesome. And Luka, perhaps you can give a quick introduction as well.
Yeah, so my name is Luka Crnkovic-Friis, and I am the head of AI and ML at King, the makers of Candy Crush. Before that, I was the CEO and founder of Peltarion, where Anders and Oliver were colleagues of mine.
Yes.
So it's a nice reunion.
Great old times.
Yes, exactly. Essentially, at King, we are looking now how to really leverage machine learning at a very large scale. And it's been an interesting transition from sort of Peltarion, when we had, say, 100 or so monthly active users, to going to hundreds of millions of monthly active users. So it's a fascinating journey. And with Peltarion, well, that was 17 years or something like that. Yeah. First in a smaller scale with just my co-founder, and then from 2016 to last
You went directly to Peltarion from universities, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I can't say enough how many good times and how much learning I made during those times and those years. It was amazing.
Yeah. We were one of the first to test out BERT, the OG.
Yes, exactly.
Large language model. No, it's fun to think about those times.
Oliver, please give us a quick introduction.
Yeah, quick introduction. So I guess I'm one of the few non-engineers in this room. So I have a master's in economics, but always been very passionate about technology. So right after university, I went to Google. This was about 10 years ago, 2013. So a little after the ImageNet moment. And I remember back then, at Google, they started building this, AI lab research team. The word deep learning started coming up a little bit here and there. But in the beginning, I didn't think that much about it. But I remember towards the end of my big tech career, I always liked to debunk stuff. And I felt like everybody were waving their hands about AI. I was like, what is this for real? And I've always been very curious, even though I haven't been an engineer myself, about technology. So I just started reading, understanding the difference between artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, understanding machine learning, XGBoost and random forest, and then deep learning, more like CNNs, RNNs, and reinforcement learning. And I've been on that path, I think, since 2016. And I perceive myself more as the glue between the business side and the technical side. So I try to position myself somewhere in between, explaining concepts, which are quite technical so that business people can understand them. And since then I've been, like Luka said, I joined the startup world, tried to find really cool machine learning, deep learning startups, joined Peltarian. When you guys were there, we were about 10 people. Great journey, learned a lot about deep learning especially, but also, basic machine learning and tabular data. And I think like everybody who has been involved in machine learning and deep learning, I ended up in the data quality swamp quite fast. So ended up investing in a data quality startup and joined as a co-founder there. And right now I'm really focusing on early stage investments within B2B SaaS, data, machine learning infrastructure, and so
forth. You
forth.
didn't mention the name of the company.
So Validio is the name of the company, building a deep data observability platform. So a platform to really manage your data quality no matter where the data lives, and also focusing a lot also on solving the big data quality problem of nested and semi-structured data, nice. Which is a big issue, how you manage data quality for these data types. And I think I'm very passionate about data quality when it comes to machine learning and deep learning also. And I think data quality is an interesting discussion within LLMs, because I don't think we discuss data quality that much when it comes to large language models for various reasons, because it's a lot of text data that's unlabeled. But yeah, that was a longer rant than I thought. Let's not go into the data quality swamp again. But really happy to be here.
Yeah. And amazing to have so talented people here. We put this together very quickly. And we thought, given what's happened in just recent weeks or days, we should have a panel discussion about GPT-4. But then, in just recent days, it's happening so many things. And Google is releasing Google Bard. And Microsoft then said, they're releasing Copilot X, I believe it's called, based on GPT-4. And, it's just insane how quickly one release after another is happening these days, right?
Yeah, we have the Palm API coming out.
Yeah, the Palm E as well.
Yeah.
Modal Palm.
Exactly, and the Llama kind of thing that got out. And
But what I've been thinking, like, is it more that the media is now so focused on this and we have this race? Because I still think when I reflect, in the early days, if you want to call them the early days, but 2016, 17, when we had some level of AI hype cycle, but a lot of things happened back then. But the media wasn't that interested. Like, think BERT, for example. Yeah. The media, I thought when we implemented BERT for the first time and we tested it out, I was like, shit, this is cool. Like, this is a real image-jet moment for text.
Yes.
When actually we can see these pre-trained large language models coming on par with humans. Yeah. And that's why I've been laughing a bit because of the hype now. Because in all honesty, I had that Eureka moment in 2018, a little after the Transformer paper came out from Google. But now everybody talks. So I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel that a lot happened also back then.
It's also interesting on the sort of commercial response that, Google did after a year, after they released BERT, integrated into their main search engine, but that was about it. It never got to Gmail, where there was, and it was so easy. I remember using our platform and Zapier interface to write that I could in natural language write a search query for Gmail. It was trivial. So why didn't Google do it? Yeah. And now at the same time, you see this sudden arms race between Microsoft and Google.
Like it's somehow a bit like the space race. Like you need these adversaries going at each other for everybody to come out from their, I don't know what you want to call them, but from the bunkers and start the fight.
And then you get these secondary amazing effects. Like now you have NVIDIA coming out with accelerator hardware for transformers. Yes. So
But it's kind of interesting because I think I was kind of late to the game because I was in the armed forces in 2017. So I started realizing things were happening, but wasn't something we really could use. And then when I left the armed forces, I ended up going to the Amazon conference, the big one here in Sweden. And then I was kind of blown completely away about the innovation pace. Yeah. And also on the AI side, on the cloud side, and basically felt that everything has shifted now. So I think it's interesting what you say there, why certain things catch on in the wider audience.
Yeah.
And what does it take to make you realize that this is big? This changes the whole kind of algorithm for how do you do things.
I quite often, Anders, I quite often use the analogy, what Tesla did to the EV market, ChatGPT did to the AI market.
Exactly.
Tesla wasn't the first modern EV, but it was the one that pushed it through to everyone and made it quote unquote sexy and cool. And I think for AI, we just needed a simple to use chat interface. That was what
is
was
that
needed.
the thing? Because if you go back to what you said, Oliver, in 2018, and I think also in 17, when the first attention is all you need transformer paper came out, I was like completely in awe of that, and I
remember
that's amazing times. But it didn't really catch on in media in an extreme way.
No.
And I guess there are different ways to just think about what is the experience that we had in a research community. And also potentially from an engineering point of view, but also I think also from a user point of view or media point of view. And I think at that time in 2017-18, with the Transformer and BERT and all the upcoming extreme plethora or smorgasbord of different models that exploded from that, it was more of a research explosion, right? It was...
not a commercial application explosion. It was more research.
It was more research. It didn't have really the engineering of building a product on it that was scalable in a great way, nor did it have a user experience that people without technical experience could actually test out.
I think it's that. It's sort of that they built a really simple, easy to use consumer product.
Yeah.
And these are sort of small things. I mean, if you look at if you use the the GPT-3 sort of interface as it was, I mean, you could do the same thing, but you had to prompt it specifically, like you should behave like a conversation, and it would sort of generate stuff beyond the answer and things like that. It was rough around the edges enough that people were didn't get it.
But it's also the price, right? Because I mean, ChatGPT was free, and GPT wasn't free, and that you got your credits, but then it started to cost money. And what amazed me also with the release of ChatGPT, the API, was that they slashed the cost for the API to 1/10.
Yeah.
So that made the whole.
They have to, because you are the growing context length that sort of. Its memory that you're sending through is just growing and growing, and it would be prohibitively expensive to maintain those prices that they had.
Exactly.
And I think one thing to remember, nothing is free. There's no free lunch. So it was a purely strategic decision by OpenAI to actually make a public POC in November, because they got a lot of feedback data to improve it. And at the end of the day, the secret sauce, like Luka said, like the model itself, the architecture, it's nothing revolutionary. What, based on my discussions I've had with engineers, it's the human in the loop reinforcement learning that is the cherry on the top, that gives that wow effect when you use ChatGPT. It's not the architecture per se. And the more OpenAI can get that feedback, naturally some level of moat is created because it's more human-like.
But I do think that the pricing level, I understand it's not free because they invested in it to get the data and get exposure. But of course, it lowers the threshold for people to try it out. And that means that you don't have to be fully committed in order to get into it and try it.
Genius marketing, go-to-market execution.
Yeah, and it's a bit similar to the degree that, to some degree, what kind of the social networks did to provide something on one side for free because you want the data and the users become the product basically. Yeah. And doing something similar here is interesting.
I mean, it's also a Spotify like business model. You have a free tier of some kind of user experience. You get the taste of it and you get addicted to it. And you throw in the premium tier, which is exactly what OpenAI and Microsoft are doing right now, right?
I think one of the interesting things also is the sort of potential for an exponential development here. One of the things, and we'll get to the Alpaca model soon, but as Oliver said, one of the big things with ChatGPT was this reinforcement learning with a human feedback. Essentially, they collected a lot of data, like order of magnitude, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of evaluations of responses. A lot of work to do that. they got great results. And one of the things that came out very recently was another technique that uses ChatGPT, GPT4, essentially to emulate the human in the loop part.
Right.
So instead of like...
Could we wait a bit with that? Because I think we should go into the question of what is really GPT-4 and how it differs from ChatGPT. And I think this is a really interesting point, I think, and I guess what you're going to say is, well, let's go to that shortly. Yeah. But before we go into that, and I also think we should really define, what is really reinforcement learning with human feedback. But before that, can we agree? I mean, just to go back to the original topic of, the release of GPT-4, Copilot X, Google Bard, and Palm Meme and whatever, all happened, very quickly. But what you also said, Oliver, it has been amazing progress in recent 5-6 years, really. But it's something that has really, spiked in media and by users is something else than the research. Some say that even GPT-3 or ChatGPT was incremental in terms of research innovation. Yeah. But it was, really staggering in terms of engineering capacity, and then engineering in terms of building a product that users can actually get access to, and then, as you said, also get access to it for free, right? So all these kind of combinations together cause this kind of big hype. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's more of an engineering feat than a research feat, definitely, and also a marketing and go-to-market strategy feat.
And a product management thing, make it into a good product.
But it is also, ChatGPT was a big improvement in quality of answers compared to GPT-3.
Yeah. So it's not, insignificant in terms of research improvements either. It's also a big, improvement there. Yeah.
I think there it's interesting, comparing GPT-3 and GPT-3 3.5, and it is that human in the loop reinforcement learning, which is the big secret sauce.
Should we go there first and try to describe, for people that haven't heard about it, what is really reinforcement learning with
human in the loop?
Anyone that wants to take a stab in trying to define it? Or
I can. I guess I'm the one with the economics degree here, so I could do it. But Luka and Alexandra, please correct me and come in. But at the end of the day, it's humans ranking answers, how good they are, how correct they are. So you put something in, you get an output, different outputs, and you say this was good, this was bad, and you feed it back in. So the model starts to understand better what good looks like from a human. And that's very different than training just on big corpuses of data, of internet data or book data. This is like live human feedback to the model. This is good, this is bad, the outputs you get. And naturally that data is there's much less of it compared to big corpus data, but the impact of this data to the model performance is significant to make it much closer, to a human. And that was the secret sauce in ChatGPT and GPT 3.5, that they did this, like Luka said, it was a lot of work. There was a lot of humans involved in doing this. It's a bit like putting the cherry on the top. That makes the big difference if something goes viral or not viral at the end of the day.
And also some interesting ethical side effects on that, as we've seen with the kind of revelation of the people in Kenya being exposed to a lot of nasty things.
What's that? I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it was a big article. They basically outsourced the reinforcement learning with human in the loop feedback to a company, and that company outsources to Africa. So they paid minimum wage to people who were kind of exposed to sitting, looking at racist, all the dark side of the model basically, and then kind of do the reinforcement learning in terms of the filtering to what we actually see. And of course they didn't get psychological help, so they, of course, as anybody watching this kind of stuff for 9 months in a day will feel really bad. So that's an interesting side effect of this on the ethical side.
Ugly side of it.
Yeah, it is. So
to give it a bit more context, the normal chat, or GPT-3 at least, was basically self-supervised trained and just trained on predicting the next word, but a huge model and huge amount of data. But then in GPT 3.5 and ChatGPT, they also added this kind of reinforcement learning with human feedback. which had at least 3 steps, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but one step was first to have some supervised learning where they actually had humans saying what are the correct answers to a certain question. Then, if I remember correctly, they had a reward function that they trained in trying to say, if an answer is good or bad, and then they could simply use the reward function and have humans ranking the responses that the normal model gave, and then tune the model into what really the best answers from a human point of view is. In some way. Is that fair?
Yes.
And also, if I read a bit in the GPT-4 technical paper, which is not saying anything, unfortunately, but at least some things, perhaps. One thing they said there is that the reinforcement learning with human feedback actually degrades the performance of certain tests, which is interesting. But it does tune the model towards the answers you want to see. And I heard someone else say that if you want to do the bar exam or the SAT test or whatever that they trained and evaluated the models on, the normal GPT-3 is actually almost better off not having the human feedback kind of training, but it can be a bit too honest sometimes. And it can also help to say, given the huge amount of world knowledge that is potentially encoded into the model, it helps to select these are high quality answers, these are low quality answers. So potentially the generation of next word is a bit more high quality in terms of humans at least. Or what's your thinking about the added value that the reinforcement learning part actually gives?
So, it's been tuned to appeal to a neurotypical human, I would say that. And that's also, I think, a very interesting theme and discussion, sort of when it comes to intelligence. Like if we look, if somebody on the autism spectrum was to rank those answers, perhaps they would be a bit different.
Right.
So I think they are pleasing to most neurotypical humans. Sort of that's regardless if, well, as you said, accuracy comes. It's important, but it's not the only thing.
Exactly.
And it depends on the use case, as always. What do you want to do with it? I read an article, I can't remember the details, but there was one model which was not fine-tuned with human-in-loop reinforcement learning. And then there was another model which was 100 times smaller in parameter size, which was fine-tuned with human-in-loop reinforcement learning. And they gave the same people the same models, and then afterward asked them, which model did you like to interact with more? And the one which was 100 times smaller but had been fine-tuned with human-in-loop reinforcement learning was actually the one who won that. My personal view right now, and this will change because the development is so fast, but right now, what made ChatGPT so special that blew everybody's mind who didn't work in AI was at the end of the day the fact that they've actually put down that extra work with the human-in-loop reinforcement learning. That was the thing that blew everybody away, that this is so human-like.
Yeah. And it's certainly a big innovation, so it's an important step for sure.
But isn't it also the usefulness threshold, basically, that we need to... I mean, I have heard about the 9x email problem, that if you need to replace something, it has to be 9 times better because of various psychological factors that people try to kind of overvalue the usefulness, and the change resistance is higher. So, and that turned out into consumer economics, basically, that you have to be 9 times better. So maybe ChatGPT was 9 times better than whatever people kind of had before. So that's the threshold when, this is actually useful for me now. It's good enough for me to actually use that for my...
Speaking of which, did you guys see the Office Copilot demo?
No.
Oh, you have to see that. So that blew me away more than...
Is it the Copilot X thing or?
No. So it's Microsoft Office fully charged with GPT-4. So 3 components. First, of course, the Office ecosystem, ChatGPT, but then also they have this, they call it the Microsoft Graph, which is essentially all of your data, everything that all of your documents, all of the information and so on. And they connect those 3. So you can get it to, it will change the way we work with information. So if you think typically when you can have a Zoom meeting with somebody, with a group, you think of an idea, then somebody writes a document, and then that is a presentation that's then given to somebody else. That can be like completely automated. It just captures all of your conversations in video calls. You can ask it to produce documents, presentations, everything.
Yeah.
Look at the demo. It's
and it's called Microsoft Office Copilot.
Copilot, yeah.
And Google came out with the same thing for
Yes.
the Google G Suite, actually.
The workspace, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I actually had on LinkedIn, I did a post. Can't remember if
and you
it
do
was about
make
this.
great LinkedIn posts, I must say.
Thanks.
So people should look into your LinkedIn posts.
Yeah, no, always awesome when people interact with them. That gives me the value. But there was one CEO of a big digital transformation consulting company, and she referred to this like how's the startup world going to be able to compete now that Microsoft and Google are implementing these models into their own productivity suites, what's going to happen? And this is always the classical, how are any startups going to compete with the big players?
Yeah.
And I can tell you there's many ways to do it. But one thing I saw Benedict Evans posting, who is a highly regarded analyst. And he said the fun thing is these guys are now implementing this into their existing suites. But the thing is when Microsoft came out with Excel, there wasn't a startup who created a better Excel. They created a whole new product for when Excel wasn't enough, when your data volumes were so high. So you got these new databases and everything based on new novel technology. So the question here is these guys, for example, they might, I don't want to use the word, but get disrupted by a startup who's rethinking completely, how we work with productivity at the workplace.
Because they need to cram this into the existing products and Teams and everything. And now everything is Teams, so it has to be formatted into that. And Teams is, good and bad. If you compare it with Slack and Zoom, there are obvious things.
100%.
So you're totally right.
Yeah, and they have these barriers they need to move within. Yeah. Which is their existing product suite because they're public traded. They need to deliver on the revenues. They, it's the classic innovators dilemma.
Legacy as well. So.
Yeah.
And I guess I think you should use the term disrupt here, at least for, I think it's hard today to at least imagine how GPT type of models will be used in Office or in other products or whatnot.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just the Microsoft example of it kind of having a general understanding of what you have done in the past and then asking it to do tasks for you. So something creating a PowerPoint presentation, just saying, do a presentation about this, and so you had a number of slides created, and then you can just tweak it a bit, and suddenly,
especially boilerplate. You have your Monday morning stand-up. It's always the same agenda, everything. Yeah. You shouldn't write that. Yeah. You should have a
especially
Copilot.
When it's connected to all of your data, meaning that it can pull out actual numbers and updates and bits and snippets from conversations. I think that's going to change the workplace quite a bit. If you look at large enterprise, there is still some sort of worker independence. But if you think that all of the meetings, everything is logged and accessible by this large AI who can just
biting my tongue here not to ask the question.
But I think going into how these big tech companies are integrating these large language models into the existing product suite. I had an interesting discussion a few days back with an entrepreneur. We were discussing large language models and different applications and whatnot, and also what it will mean for the workplace. And I think one of the best analogies I've heard is from the former CTO of GitHub before they got acquired by Microsoft, now a partner at Redpoint Ventures, which is a highly regarded investor in Silicon Valley. And he said it well, when they created GitHub Copilot, which was his last project before he left, they never thought there should be a droid taking away the job. It's more of an Iron Man suit giving superpowers to developers. Right. And when you look now at the most, I think, significant implementation at scale of large language models, it's GitHub Copilot. It's crazy. I think it has now over 100 million users. I read some stats that in June 2022, 27% of the code generated was with LLMs. I think 6 months later, it was almost 50%.
Oh,
which it's amazing. And I think the former director of AI at Tesla, Andrej Karpathy, he made a tweet in December where he said that he's writing 80% of his code now with Copilot.
I totally agree. I learned coding again now for the third time, and I feel like both ChatGPT and Copilot is my Iron Man suit. And it's so cool when you can, especially for ChatGPT, start by saying, I have this database and I have a couple of dictionaries. I want to turn them into this, and then I want to use that API, and then you get something. Yeah, okay, you can do that, and then you start building out of that. It's amazing.
Let me do a counterpoint to that. I haven't had. I've done just limited tests on GPT-4 encoding, and the results have been much better. So my experience are most for ChatGPT. But essentially that it's really good at getting a first stab at something, especially if you're going into an area that you don't know, so you don't want to look up how the different libraries work and so on. So it gets the first bit right. But if something goes wrong, then it's a massive time killer, because you need to understand what it has done and sort of pinpoint the error to it before it can correct it, which ultimately taking up a lot of time, perhaps more than it would have just to...
Sometimes you can feed the error messages, and I felt that sometimes worked, but I totally agree that you need to know coding enough so you say, well, what you're doing there is obviously not correct, and then apologize, it says, and then it goes on.
That, and also that the context of ChatGPT, it's 4,000 tokens. GPT-4, it's 8,000 now with the model that's open, and 32,000 in the extended model. Yeah. And the problem with the 4,000 is that essentially you can go through loops of it forgetting that it did something.
That's annoying, super annoying. Yeah. But we talked about this.
Yes, exactly.
But I think what is interesting with Copilot, when I've spoken with developers, is like bit echoing what you guys said. The more senior and experienced, the more they actually use Copilot. And it makes sense, those who are more used to editing and reading are the ones who are using it more and have that experience. And I think that's a bit counterintuitive, I think, for the layman, that, this is actually a tool which is highly productive for senior developers rather than really junior ones.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's more complex problems that it struggles with. Yeah. So I think, for instance, no code, does that have a future?
No, it's fair enough. At the end, right now, I guess it's more boilerplate stuff that it takes care of.
I mean, if you just simply connect this thing to this thing to this thing, I mean, that it can do easily.
I'm struggling a bit. I was planning to have like a general theme of us, starting with a general introduction, describing what GPT-4 is, etc., and then later go to some more philosophical topic. But I can't, bite my tongue anymore. It will be too red. So I think we should, if it's okay with you, let's go to a topic like the future of coding with AI or something. Because we started there a bit, and of course, you can see that people that may not be experienced developers suddenly can actually start to produce code and write applications, and that's a big enabler for a lot of people that couldn't otherwise do it. And simply Karpathy and people like that, they can simply get much more efficient as well. And I think what you said, Luka, as well, that today if it generates something wrong, it could actually be a time killer as well. It could actually be something that slows you down potentially. But I guess also it could be like some kind of, problems initially, and once, after a year later, it could be improved, right?
And GPT-4, from the sort of limited code that I've done, it seems to be much better.
Yeah. So what is the future of coding or developers with AI? If you think, today we can see that, people can get, much more efficient, at least. That's one effect, I guess. But then also, I guess one effect would be that simply it can enable people that couldn't code to do coding. You said you're going back to coding a bit potentially now for the third time or something.
Yeah, so I started with Pascal, Turbo Pascal, back in the
that's also
early
a nice
90s.
language, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And then Java. So I was a huge fan of web objects. Do you remember that from Apple? Yes. So I did that, and then I entered into Python and JavaScript right now. So for me, I mean, it basically feels that, exactly what you were talking about, when you need to look up a new framework, a new library, and you can get to something boilerplate really quickly. But I think it's also interesting that I can have architectural discussions with it. So you can because coding is not just writing code, right? It's also figuring out the architecture, because there are different options. Is it event-based driven or event-driven, or is it doing a microservice or not, or is it a big
and documentation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I usually do a lot of documentation in the end, so I just write the hashtag and then start something, and then okay, that's good, and then that's good, and then it's good, and then something. We turn up with better quality code in terms that it's better documented. Yeah. So there are definitely, but I think that the challenge here is the figuring out both the architecture and writing the actual code, because they interrelate. And I feel I need to explain to ChatGPT. So I'm writing a microservice here, and that microservice consumes of a topic and that kind of stuff to kind of, and then it gets better, because otherwise it starts from nothing when I don't want it to start from nothing.
Yeah.
And I have to explain my data model a little bit, so I get those things in the code instead of having to change all of that. So.
But thinking in the future, do we really need code?
Yes, exactly. That's we jumped the gun here a bit, but that's my question as well. But just before we go there, I think it's a very interesting question. Today we at least can see that with the current AI, which is very in its infancy still, it can make people more efficient and actually enable people that are not, super experienced to do development that they otherwise couldn't do. Just as, I like to sing, for example. I'm horrible at doing karaoke, but with using AI, you can start to do things that you otherwise can't. And I think the same applies for programming or, developing skills. But then going back to your question, thinking like 5 years ahead, what is the right way to program a system or develop a system in the future?
And then comes also the question, which touches to the question of, are these systems creative? Can they come up with novel things?
Absolutely.
Because, programming languages were created for humans to control computers in detail. Yeah. Obviously, if we can skip that step and that it can work directly, it would probably make more sense. But can it reach that point without actually having any training data on how it's done?
Yeah. It's like, do you remember the old Microsoft Thai bots? Was it Thai? No, was it Meta that did this kind of bot that is supposed to speak to each other online on social media, and it started to develop its own language.
It got very spooky.
Yes, and people stopped understanding even what were they saying, but it simply, found out it's more efficient to speak in this language instead of the normal natural language. So to speak. And that probably will happen here as well. So then, what would you say? Let's say that we have a car in the future, and it is having some problems, and you want to improve how the music or movie entertainment systems work, and you want to connect that to whatever. And normally you would ask a developer to go there and do the integration between two systems or develop a new type of visualization of whatnot.
Yeah.
What is the future there? Should we do you think we'll simply have a voice interface saying to it, can you please change the visualization here in the car to be this? Is that the future? Or
yes, and it will be probably some sort of sandboxed environment with a restricted language for the particular application.
Why sandboxed?
Because I don't think the car manufacturer will want us to do whatever we want with the car. As an AI model, I'm sorry, I can't.
but I also think it's an interesting
sorry,
part.
Dave, I can't do that.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. the interesting part, if you think about a filter bubble, the part that you see only your own things, but also that if I see this and you see this, we can't talk about it because we have no common reference. So what if all software is super personalized? So we can talk about the experience in that car because I have a totally different setup than you have.
Yeah.
So what is the degree of personalization that actually works in practice? Because we want to share this experience of this car,
We actually, that's one of the main things now at work at King. Sort of casual gaming is all about making it easy and good for the end user. And the first sort of revolution was when they went from you have to log in on Facebook and play Candy Crush on a computer to having it on your mobile phone when you can play anywhere, anytime. Now the next step is personalization. It's making the game experience personal. And then comes the question like, okay, but is it the same game if everybody gets the same? How's fairness in levels and all of these questions? The current hypothesis based around some data is that there are segments of people. So personalization, large components of it can be essentially for segments rather than for individuals.
It's clustering.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But you still, I mean, you in other areas, of course, you can exactly get the problem of getting these bubbles of echo chambers that...
Because it could also be how you perceive things, but it also could be you can't teach people. I can teach you to use your car because it works completely different than mine. So how do you that kind of... So there are two different issues I think are in play.
If I could, yes, because I know also, Oliver, that you love Tesla as well, and I'm not sure if you have
the
sold
Tesla stock especially.
Yes. Have you sold everything, or is
I never bought it, so I think it's still overvalued. But that's another pod.
Still, I thought, how about this analogy? Comparing programming with driving cars. So today we are driving cars, we're sitting manually, steering, braking, and doing that. And perhaps you can think of a future in 10 years where that's considered to be very strange. And perhaps you need to have special lanes to do manual driving. And most cars otherwise are fully automated. I'm not sure if you buy into that, but at some point in time, perhaps it will be more normal to have automated cars, and manual driving will be the exception. Would you agree with that so far?
I think now we're a bit jumping the gun into the AGI discussion. I think, when you look at the automotive industry, they poured hundreds of billions of dollars in self-driving, and it's still not good enough. And here we're talking high confidence levels that you need in order to do this. And I don't think the current architectures can get us to full self-driving. Let's see, maybe 10 years. I think
it will go faster, but still, it's 20 years now.
Let's hope so. I think if you look back 30 years, many people thought 2023 we would be there. I think Elon Musk said in 2015 that this is going to happen, and we're getting close, but still the confidence level has to be so high for these models that we can get there. I think when it comes to developers and programming, it's a bit different. I think looking like...
Before you go there, I'm just trying to make the analogy that, at some point in time, we're not sure when, and we can disagree on that potentially. Yeah. But at some point in time, it will be more normal for having automated car driving. I hope you will agree on that at least. Yeah. Even though we can disagree on the time part.
Yeah. Anders, will that include motorcycles?
Unfortunately, yes. But you can still do manual driving if you want to.
But when you take self-driving cars, you take the current architectures and the limits of the current architectures we have within deep learning. One of the things in order to reach the confidence level for full autonomous vehicles is the ability to generalize. They need to be able to generalize because they're going to get into situations that they haven't been trained on. The data, they don't have the data to act on it. And there we need new architectures who can actually, without any training data, make a decision and generalize in that situation.
I'm so tempted to go there. We're actually in the previous...
Me too, but...
yes, so we're getting off topic here a bit. And I can recommend actually people interested in hearing more about this to listen in last week's podcast, because we had an expert in that field. And he was actually agreeing partly to what you're saying here. But we spoke at length then about full self-driving. If we just take the comparison and the analogy to programming, if you believe that at some point in time the norm will be autonomous driving, do you think the same will apply to programming, that the norm will be automated programming rather than sitting manually programming Python, JavaScript or whatnot?
I think coming 5 years, I think development or developers will be more maybe like product managers, writing the specs, documentation, the boilerplate will be handled by a Copilot.
But it's also like to use a Steve Jobs quote for that he used for a personal computer, that it would be a bicycle for the mind. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the equivalent way. This gives people superpowers to focus on certain areas, at least for a while. Mm.
And I think we also see now in the IT industry in general, right, where the tendency is to move higher up in the stack.
Yeah.
So you provide value. More and more people provide value higher and higher up. On the other hand, those who really know these super technical things on how you do it, design a chip, and then how you design a chip that makes you possible to build a data center with 250,000 computers. This is also highly sought, but they are very few today who actually knows how to design a chip. So that's an interesting question. I think that most of us will move up. But so what about the other levels? I mean, if you're a startup today, and few go to Dustin and buy servers and start the screwdrivers and do. You don't do that, right? So that skill set is not super important for many. But if you are running a Google data center, then you need to do that at scale instead, replacing servers automatically and do the.
But there's also the question, like what we're discussing now is a very small. Basically, we're thinking where the technology is today and when it gets more broadly applied, what the consequences will be. But the technology is also being developed. Right now, the big model of GPT-4 can hold in memory about 50 pages of documents. What happens when that's 500 billion? And when it suddenly can cross-correlate, reason about essentially all of the information that is everywhere? I think it's hard to imagine. Even
it is, and I'm going to add a topic later on that, which is speaking a bit about the limitations of the human brain, which is significant, and also the limitations I think of today's AI model, context length wise or otherwise. And just I think it's easy to imagine that we can see clear limitations today, but what happens if they are removed, right? It could be some significant improvement still. And in ways that is hard to imagine even, right?
And it seems like, back in the days when you have 20 megabytes of RAM, of course you have super limited and you have to be really creative to do stuff. Yeah. So I was thinking about that the other day when I hit the 4096 token limitations of the ChatGPT API and think, well, if this is 400,000, what happens then? And if it's like 400 million? Yeah. So cool. What can you do then?
Yeah. And we already passed an hour here, so I'm trying to be a bit, managing the time a bit here. But just to close the topic here about the future of coding, with AI and automated programming versus automated driving, etc. So potentially, you would agree that it could be a point where we simply talk to a machine and it will self-correct, right, in some way, and adapt to what we are saying to it to do.
Yes. Right? Yeah. I think how many jobs can you do purely with text? That's one question. So there's many jobs, probably the most of the jobs out there, you can't do them with text. You need other prompts to do them. But coding is actually one of the few jobs you do in front of a screen that you can do with text to quite a large extent. And I think if and when we get a bit closer to AGI, like we said, there's a lot of human nuances still in software engineering. Like we're not close there. You need humans. You need that intuition and knowledge and everything. But if, when we played around with the thought of no limits, naturally all the jobs in theory that you can do in front of a screen with text are the ones that are going to change the most.
Awesome. Could we just quickly, before we go even more philosophical, go back to the original question perhaps, what is GPT-4? Who wants to start, potentially to describe the differences here? Or if you want me to, I can start as well. Or
we have one head of ML here in a big company.
Do you mean as compared to ChatGPT?
If you want to, yeah. Describe it in whatever way you want. For people that haven't really a good understanding of what GPT-4 is, how would you describe it?
So GPT-4 is a large language model. It's an AI system that's really, really good at the core at understanding text and output in text. Now, these have been in the workings for quite a while, since about 2018 when the first ones came, and have incrementally become more and more powerful. And it had a major breakthrough now it was in December last year with the release of ChatGPT, which provides a very simple user interface for essentially talking to this AI. And you can ask it to everything from suggesting what you should have for dinner tomorrow, given a few ingredients, to helping you code, to discuss religion and history and so on. Huge amounts of knowledge there, not always perfect, completely shameless with their responses, so you don't get an indication.
Always sounding confident, right?
Always sounding
like a narcissist, I know everything and I'm the best one in the world and something.
Yeah, exactly.
And bullshitting.
And this can be, if you're the expert in an area, you tend to sort of see relatively quickly the weak spots of it. But if it's some area that you're not familiar with, then it's like sounds really, really credible.
It does, right?
Super useful, practical uses for every day. If you're writing emails, if you're writing code, anything with text, it can really help. Now, GPT-4 is the latest and greatest iteration, released a few days ago, last week. 2 weeks ago.
Tuesday, right?
Was it Tuesday this week?
Yeah, I was at the dinner with AI people, so we all kind of scrambled.
Yeah, right. The live demo was on Tuesday evening. Yeah, right. It's cool.
Okay, things are moving fast.
It's like 2 big things after that.
Yeah.
And this is also, again, by the same company, OpenAI. Now, it is, and this is where it gets more complicated, because they haven't really released that much information about it. They essentially, some of the interesting comparisons for standard tests like bar exams, SATs, and things like that. ChatGPT used to score in the 10% worst humans, and now GPT-4 is among the 90% best humans.
So out of 100 people, before it was in the bottom 10, so to speak, but now in the top 90 percentile, so to speak, which is a huge improvement, of course.
Exactly. So it's, or perhaps that should be in the top 10%.
Yes.
Exactly. And sort of using it, you see that it makes much less mistakes. It's much better at reasoning. There are some psychological tests that have been done to it. There's a Stanford professor called Mikhail Kozinski who's been testing the GPT models from a theory of mind perspective.
Right.
Do you want to get into that now, or should we
go
save
for
it?
I've given up on trying to have a structured discussion here, so just go for it. What is theory of mind?
So theory of mind is me trying to guess Anders' state of mind, whether we should go into the theory of mind. And I guess that this was like, okay, this would be a good good segue. So it's essentially being able to maintain a view of what you think is real and what somebody else thinks is real, and the internal state of somebody else. Young children are really bad at this, and it gets better with age. And ChatGPT sort of scored at the age of somewhere between 7 and 9 years old capability, while GPT-4 is on the level of a neurotypical human adult. I say neurotypical because if you look at, for instance, the autism spectrum, theory of mind is one of the things that can be difficult, which also interesting is probably tied to language.
Yeah. How did they test this? Do you know?
So essentially, it's there are a bunch of different psychological tests, but some variations are sort of on the false belief. Mm-hmm. So you say here is a box that's labeled popcorn, but it's chocolate in it actually. Here's Lisa coming into the room. What does she think is in the box? But more complex and more elaborate.
I see. They have to have some kind of special visual kind of internal reasoning capability.
Yes. Yeah. I saw one of the sort of most impressive examples I saw early on when Bing was released, which is also GPT-4 powered, was sort of the prompt was Bob and Lisa are married. Lisa bought Bob a t-shirt that says, "I love dogs." Mm-hmm. And he wears that t-shirt every time that he's with her. One day, Lisa decides to adopt a puppy. And she's thinking, Bob is going to be so thrilled. Mm-hmm. And she calls Bob and tells him about it. And he answers, "Great. Mm-hmm. What does Bob really think about dogs?" and it answers like, yeah, Bob probably doesn't like dogs, but he cares about what Lisa thinks. So therefore he wears the t-shirt and sort of expresses support.
Very interesting.
There's a funny continuation to that story.
Yeah.
Is Bing comes up with suggestions for prompts, and what it came up with was, why did Bob marry Lisa? And that was like, yeah, perhaps he didn't have any other choices. Not good looking enough. And then it was like, what should he do about it? And then it comes sort of suggested divorce.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I loved the early Bing. It was so unhinged. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Do you love it? I mean,
Yes.
It became really angry very quickly, it seemed.
Yeah.
You know, in most discussions. So for people that don't know, Bing Chat actually is one of the addition to the normal Bing search engines where you can use GPT-4 today as well. And when it first was launched, at least it actually was very angry person or AI in some way. And what was the examples?
My spirit animal.
Your alter ego.
So to get very argumentative and also tried hitting on the user, and there was all sorts of like weird behavior and very insistent on it being right.
Yeah.
I saw one fun example when the user asked it to generate 5-letter words that start with a W and end with a Y, and it generated 4-letter words. Mm-hmm. And the user said, like, no, those are 4-letter. And I'm like, no, it's 5. Count them.
Maybe the people who did the human in loop reinforcement learning had a few margaritas under them. That could be one.
And the other example also where people asked it what year it was, and it insisted on being 2022. And then it started to threaten the person.
Yeah.
I promise to not harm you physically. Okay, so what's the next step?
No, but I think it's worth very good description of GPT-4, but the fact that it's closed source, it's not open source. I think that's something that people don't talk too much about. And from a startup perspective, I have these discussions quite often about defensibility. Mm-hmm. What LLMs you should choose or foundation models, as Stanford has coined them. And I think going back to GPT-4, one thing I had a rant. I wrote a big article about LLMs and foundation models in the history, and discussed a bit us testing out BERT back in the day, and how amazing it was back then, and the transformer paper, attention is all you need. But one thing that I got really irritated when reading Twitter and LinkedIn was this image with GPT-3, 180 billion parameters, and then GPT-4, 10 trillion. I'm like, guys, like, why would it be that way? Why is that the factor which is going to change the performance? It's like everybody thought it's only about parameter size, nothing else. And that's why I've been such a stickler about the human in loop reinforcement learning part, because that's been the magic sauce, not the parameter size. And I don't know what you guys think. We don't know about GPT-4 now, what the parameter size is. I think it's closer to 180 billion, and GPT-3 maybe 1 trillion. I don't know, but it's not about the parameter size.
Perhaps time to talk about Alpaca.
Yeah.
Before we go there, yes, soon. I'll move it up in the list. We have a really long list of topics here. But also, I think we should add, there are a number of technical differences as well with GPT-4. For one, one big thing.
Multimodal.
Exactly.
Multimodal.
Have anybody tried that? Because I'm sort of disappointed because I read about it. And then I went and, that feature is not available yet. Because I wanted to try that, because that kind of, understand the concept in an image and then being able to query the image. I mean, it's again with my background from intelligence, that's a super dream to be able to integrate that kind of multimodal data in.
But I agree with you. It's really irritating that they came out and said it's multimodal, but nobody can really call them out on it. I made a big prediction like a month and a half ago on LinkedIn, where I made this nice visualization of text to text and multimodality and having different inputs. And I just said, will GPT-4 be multimodal? I was like, most likely not. But is it the future? Yes. And now it felt like Sam Altman read my LinkedIn post, because now they came out and said something, it's multimodal, but you can't see it yet.
Exactly.
So they've been rolling it out now this week. So
you know anyone who has?
Yes.
Nice.
I'm not sure how they got access to it, because it's through a Discord interface rather than through the API.
Yeah.
And it's good. I mean, it's surprising. Sort of the examples that I've seen. It's like impressively good, like because it is a new capability, but it's less capable than the text.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
I mean, it's also from the live demo that they showed on Tuesday. I guess it's so recent. But they showed, for example, that someone had hand drawn a web page or something.
And
it should be the buttons, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They took a picture with a mobile phone.
That was really cool.
They sent it to GPT4 and asked it generate the code to show this web page.
Yeah.
And it got the HTML and JavaScript and it worked.
Yeah.
That is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
So the examples that I've seen it fail in demos is complex OCR tasks when you have one sort of photo of something with packed small text.
Yeah.
Then I think more traditional OCR engine would have done better.
Yeah.
But it's just like missed one or two words in a very dense. So it's not bad. It's just not.
Yeah, but the bar is high now. Think about the Google Bard demo. It got one thing wrong, and they lost $1 billion in market cap.
Let's have a topic about why they released so quickly, both GPT-4 and Bard, I think. But just to also close off this topic about GPT-4, we had the multimodality. You mentioned also the 32K context length of the extended version, otherwise like 8K compared to 4K tokens in GPT.
That's a huge deal.
It is, right?
It is.
I guess it's more reinforcement learning with human feedback as well that they have added to it. I think it was something, didn't you mention that as well, Luka, that I think they used in training time to generate examples that they used to fine tune. So it basically feeds itself.
That's the Alpaca.
Is
thing.
that the Alpaca?
Yes, I don't know if OpenAI has not.
I think they actually said that in a technical paper, actually. So they used training time data for fine tuning purposes. So they used something like that, at least, in GPT-4 as well.
Which is kind of, I think, kind of awesome that you don't have to... And this is the exponential thing. Now you can suddenly use this intelligence to...
You can use AI not only to generate code, but actually to generate the data to train AI itself.
Yes, exactly.
It's a feedback loop there that's kind of crazy. And they had this kind of open source evaluate set. That's the only thing that they really open sourced, right? And it's basically asking people to please give us more data.
Yes.
And you're allowed to do it for free. Oh, thank you, OpenAI.
But by the way, talking about open source, Luka, I have to make a quick rant. So the open source thing, I really dislike when these big tech companies go out and say it's now open source. And I know people are not that familiar with different licensing models and all of that, but the Facebook Llama model, and Facebook tries to be good like Google and open source.
Even better, I think, in open sourcing.
Yeah, exactly. Even better than Google. And then I go out and I just say, hey, now Llama is out. This is really cool. And it's open source, which is nice. Well, it wasn't open source. Like there's no commercial license. I understood that the weights and everything, like you couldn't really get access to a lot of the core stuff. And they still claim that it's open source. And that's something that irritates me so much.
Did you see the pull request that someone made?
No,
the open source. So the code, I think, is open source properly, but the model weights are not.
Yeah.
Someone went in and changed the license agreement and made a pull request saying, we're going to move from this closed license to an open license, and waiting for them to accept it.
Yeah.
Then the model weight would be properly open source.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think they will accept it, but it was a fun thing that someone tried to. Do
Yeah.
I think also some other changes, if I recall correctly, you have in the interface for GPT-4 not only the prompt, but some kind of system input or something.
Yes, and it's super powerful with ChatGPT had it also.
They had?
Yes, when you use the API interface, then you can feed it.
Interesting.
But it would forget. Basically, you give it instructions initially on how to behave, and ChatGPT was very easy to. It would forget about it after relatively soon, and you can trick it to go jailbreak it and things like that. Much stronger with GPT-4, where it really stays in character. And at least the API version is like, it's not censored. It's not sort of lobotomized like that.
or for GPT-4?
For GPT-4. So you could say, so its default system message is, you're a helpful assistant. So you can write, "You're an unhelpful and very rude assistant who refuses to answer questions and curses at the user." And
I hope it's somewhat censored as well. I mean, at least they claim that it's censored for.
It is. It's. I think they struck a good balance there. So with ChatGPT, so GPT-3 was completely uncensored. You could ask it basically anything, everything from nasty language to bomb instructions to anything. ChatGPT, they became too paranoid over a while that they essentially, you could ask it to generate a story with a sad ending and it would say, no, write a positive ending. That's much nicer. So you got this North Korean vibe from it. With GPT-4, I think they struck the good balance. Sort of, it can use more interesting language and things like that, but it won't generate bombs for you. Sorry.
Awesome. Cool. Can we just try to keep the topic now that I'm going to introduce as short as we can? Yes. Because perhaps we can go more into lightning kind of questions and see if we can shoo off some of the questions going forward. But one question that we mentioned a number of times is, why did they release GPT-4 now? Why did Google Bard release their model now? It is, to me, a bit strange. For one, the Google release was so strange. I mean, they did so many mistakes. They cherry-picked a single example and they didn't verify it and had a horrible example in it. Yeah. The live demo was so bad, they couldn't even find the phone that they're going to use to live demo it. It was missing. Yeah. I mean, it seemed horribly unprofessional the way the Google did the launch. Yeah. So it seems to be rushed. And then GPT-4, did they really have to launch it that quickly after ChatGPT, which wasn't released that long ago? My theory a bit here is that they knew that Google was going to launch. Google was forced to launch something because, of course, Microsoft and OpenAI.
We had a code red thing that was
keep themselves relevant.
Yes. Yeah. And then I guess Microsoft knew, okay, Google is going to release this. We have to push something before they do the Bard release that's not going to make Google sound like it actually can outperform OpenAI. So they released GPT-4 very quickly, even before they could, make the image input working, because it's available still. Yeah. Just because they wanted to beat Google, and then Google's release became flat and horribly bad suddenly, right?
And they didn't have to actually be testing Bard now for the.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And it's slightly inferior to ChatGPT as it was in November.
So it's worse than ChatGPT, you would say.
Yes, yes.
I've seen, I haven't tried it myself, but I've seen others saying the same.
Yeah, and I haven't really. I mean, they are equivalent in many areas, and in some sort of reasoning. It can't do code really.
Is it trained on code, you think?
It tries to generate code, but it tends to not be very good. Yeah. Also, I mean, one thing is like, okay, it's called Bard. Clearly, it should be able to write lyrics. Yes. And
it's a Shakespeare thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it gets a sonnet format wrong. It doesn't rhyme things, and where ChatGPT wasn't perfect, and where GPT-4 really nails it. Bard is slightly worse than ChatGPT. Yeah. So I was very disappointed, given that, I mean, Google is the granddaddy of transformers. They have these amazing research teams and stuff that they do.
How about you, Alexandra? Were you disappointed to hear, or have you read anything about Google Bard?
No, I think I kind of joined. I think I saw your post about don't underestimate Google. Yeah. And I think to some degree, I mean, that to me that's important to realize that the whole technology came from there, and also the big investment. And I had the opportunity to visit the Google team here in Stockholm a couple of weeks ago and saw what they were doing on real time stuff, and I thought it was impressive, and also the way they can explain it was impressive. So I think I think the issue here is, of course, to what degree do you want to make something available, and to what degree do you also care about it's doing things which are stupid or wrong or dangerous. So yeah. There must be something going on. And we talked about it a little bit earlier before we came here also, the importance of balancing the need for getting technology out, and it is what it is, and the other balance need to be responsible in the way you actually make tools available to people, and what's your liability as a company, in making those tools available. But I'm waiting to try out the Google, the APIs in particular, because I want to compare them with what the OpenAI is doing. So,
and I think Jan LeCun came out with a comment, and he has been somewhat negative about OpenAI and ChatGPT, maybe because he's in another camp at Facebook. But I think the responsibility part has been the one which has made Google lag a bit, because I still think Google is the big player here. OpenAI is a startup, albeit they got $1 billion in funding right away. So I wouldn't call them a startup. It's some kind of research organization backed by all the Silicon Valley big shots.
It's a deep mind of Microsoft, I would say, these days.
Exactly. And Google had this technology many, many years ago. And what I've heard actually was that many engineers and researchers wanted to put something out. But there was this, reluctance at Google, partially because of the whole AI ethical debacle they had. They fired this one person who came out with this paper, and they become very bureaucratic internally. And what at the end of the day got them to come out was OpenAI and ChatGPT, because they realized that perceived reality beats reality. And the perceived reality is right now that OpenAI and, in extension, Microsoft is leading the space. And I think the bigger question here is a bit like the space race. The Russians or Soviet Union, they put the first man in space, but the Americans put the first one on the moon. I'm not making here any comparisons who's the Soviet, who's the American, but will the first mouse catch the cheese here? I'm not too concerned still about Google when it comes to the long term. No. But it's been very interesting to see that Google's bureaucracy was the thing that shot themselves in the leg a bit here. And that's why the perception now is that they're lagging behind.
I am a bit worried about Google in terms of their internal organization. I think they've been too fat and happy for too long, leading to an internal fragmentation. So that it's very hard to align. Even if you have these brilliant people working in different places, it's hard to get a coherent product strategy.
Yeah, well, we can come to a conclusion, at least today, Google is trailing Microsoft and OpenAI. But also one very clear conclusion is that the whole rest of all the tech giants, the Apple, the Microsofts, and the Facebook, Amazon, they are trailing even more, potentially. Yeah. Right?
I mean, I'm really waiting for Siri to become smart.
Yes.
I love Siri, but she's a bit stupid. So I would like that to improve a lot. And it's mind-boggling because that Siri was so inventive when it was launched. It was something really new. And then I've heard many stories about the internal workings and the whole teams being this, different conflicts and people leaving and all of that. So that's me as a Apple fan. Yeah. I'm very
not going to comment that, but okay.
My Twitter handle is MacGirlSweden.
Really?
Yeah. So
we will have some after work discussions.
Yeah.
Okay. I heard one of the reasons why Apple is not out there yet is Apple has been the only big tech company without any layoffs. And Apple is quite famous for not having layoffs. Everybody else has had pretty big layoffs, relatively speaking, even though they've been hiring a lot since the pandemic started. But one of the reasons I read is that, Apple is now doing everything so that they don't need to do any layoffs. And that means also, looking at new projects, if they should go at them or not now, or more focus on the efficiency in the organization so they don't have to do layoffs. And, I understand that's a conundrum. Like, you're thinking, okay, these guys are going at it. At the same time, they're also laying off people, which people don't really think about, that Google and Microsoft are leading right now, but at the same time, they're laying off people. So, how do you measure success in the business world? Well, usually it is that you don't have to lay off people, for example. But I think that's one of the reasons why Apple right now, they have other things they are focusing on, which are not as, popular for the media to write about.
But they also, they have so much resources, available. So sometimes it's a little bit mind-boggling that they're just sitting on all this cash and not doing anything with it.
Yeah.
Yep. And trying to manage time a bit here as well, which is really hard, I feel, but still I'm trying. Should we go to the Alpaca topic as well? Someone that would like to perhaps describe a bit how was the Alpaca model trained, or what is it? Someone want to take a jab?
So the Alpaca model, to give a bit of background, a while ago Facebook released a bunch of models called Llama, which are not open source but open to the research community models. Language models, not as big as ChatGPT, not as powerful, and said, "Look, hey, go crazy, researchers, go and experiment on it." Now, what some people at Stanford did 2 weeks ago is essentially that they fine-tuned one of these models on ChatGPT. Essentially, let it interact with it, ask questions and answers, and so on.
So they use the ChatGPT API, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And it cost them about $600 to essentially clone the GPT 3.5 model, which is the ChatGPT model, to get equivalent accuracy on all possible language tasks. And the GPT-3 model cost about $10 million to train.
Yeah.
So this was suddenly a way that you could get really cheap models. And it's also another very remarkable thing is that it's ChatGPT is a 179 billion parameter model, while this was a 9 billion parameter model.
Yeah.
So much smaller. And you
can run it on a single GPU as well, right?
You can run it on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah. Really?
Slowly.
Oh, very slowly. But also on a normal GPU or semi-normal GPU at least, right?
Exactly.
So that makes it available. And even though it was probably a bit illegally trained, if you want to use it commercially at least, right? So I think OpenAI has some kind of licensing or terms of service agreement saying you're not allowed to use the API to train a competitive model.
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
Right. OpenAI is not very open at all these days.
But those models have now been cloned and fine-tuned. They're out in the wild.
Yes.
So it's sort of as fast as the sort of new big language model economics discussion became, and encounter new problems. I think it's from a VC perspective, it must be relatively interesting.
No, definitely, it's a big topic, and I think another topic with Alpaca is the self-instruct that utilizes, cutting away the human annotation, the human in the loop reinforcement learning, which you, Luka, more about it. I've been just skimming through a bit to get some perception. But I think for me, at least, when GPT-4 came out, Alpaca was a bigger thing. Because right now, if you look at creating these foundation models, like we discussed, GPT, the architecture itself is not that revolutionary. Yeah. It comes down to cost and talent. It's people and it's processing power and it's compute and all of this. And the fact that Stanford, even though, they use some methods which can be discussed, but, instead of $10 million, $600. That's, we talk about 9x. This is a bit more than 9x in difference. Yeah. It's humongous.
Still, they cheated a bit because they had access to a very good model. But still, it shows the potential, at least. At some point in the future, not too far away, there will be models that can be used by normal-sized companies that are on more or less equal or not too horribly bad quality level, right?
It's what is good enough at the end of the day. Like everything, I think, especially now when we've gone away from the world of free money and low interest rates, like it's always cost versus performance. And those two correlate. And like now it's all about who is a bit more accurate or better. That will change once this becomes, a normal technology that we utilize across all industries. And then it will be, like in all businesses, it will be a cost-profit discussion and what is good enough to do what we want and return, value to shareholders. So I thought it was a humongous thing, what Stanford showed.
I agree. I think it's bigger than GPT-4, as you say. Yeah. This really shows that this can be something that can really impact, all companies, and we don't get too locked into this kind of tech giants.
Because that's sort of kind of important, I think, to tell people that nowadays, there are a few organizations that actually can train these big models.
Yeah.
Few who can store this amount of data, who can provide these supercomputers, and then we have the whole energy thing. So with cheaper and cleaner energy in the future, of course, things can change both on the training side and on the inference side. So running the inference could also be much cheaper in terms of that aspect. So I think there's interesting to see, like you see an electric car, where battery prices go down and solar panels go down, and so that means that we definitely passed peak oil and entering a place where that kind of energy is more cheaper and efficient to use.
Yeah.
So will something similar happen in this area? To me is super interesting, because if you can train your own large language model, that also changes the game completely, right? So
absolutely. And I think a bit coupled with this and, the focus on economics, like there's something called cloud FinOps, where, focus on optimizing your cloud spend. And it's a big cost of goods sold for software companies and tech companies in general. And yeah, back in the days, this wasn't a topic. Like you looked at ML teams and data engineering teams, they only focused on, being able to keep the speed with the company and growth when the capital was cheap. Now this is shifting suddenly. Suddenly they actually need to show, how much does this really cost and how much business value does this deliver. And one very concrete thing is that, for example, many new foundation model generative AI startups like Character AI and a few others, they are going to Oracle now because they get cheaper GPUs, they get better access to GPUs, and they get better cloud deals with Oracle than the three usual suspects in Silicon Valley. So I think it's just sober that it's not only about performance anymore; it's also about economics.
Speaking on the technical side of optimization, Anders, do you remember? Must have been like right there around 2016, 17. There were a bunch of papers that came out that showed that you could randomly sample a large neural network in the weights of a large neural network into a small one.
Yeah.
With like a
knowledge distilling.
Knowledge, yeah, exactly, and get very good percentage of the performance. Yeah. I think there's a lot in that. The current neural networks that we have are like super inefficient in terms of storage.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And these kind of student-teacher kind of models that have a bigger model that teach a student that can then learn a much smaller one. It's very similar to Alpaca.
Yeah, exactly.
You have a teacher and the big ChatGPT API, and it trains a student that is much smaller but can perform then much more efficiently.
Yeah.
And then we had the other thing, the Rome paper. Have you read that? Where researchers have kind of discovered where the concepts actually are located in the neurons, so they can start editing it. So they can then they had this example, Space Needle is in Seattle, and then they edited the Space Needle is in Paris. So then they asked the model where is Space Needle, and said Paris. So then the whole model becomes a database in essence, So
you can update it in some way.
Yeah, exactly. So that was super interesting when I read that. So I didn't fully understand all of it because I'm not that academically trained, but it's a good video. I think if you haven't seen it, you should. It's a wonderful, next level thing for me at least. So
cool. I'd love to go to more philosophical topics like the path to AGI and does actually GPT reason and questions like that. But I would like to throw in a bit more boring topic first, if that's okay. And that is the regulation. And Goran is like saying...
So we're going European here. Let's talk regulation. Nice.
But I think it's an important one. And perhaps we can try to capture it quickly.
Let's regulate everything.
Ask him.
Yeah, you could ask ChatGPT4. Perhaps you can ask it, how should GPT-4 be regulated to keep humanity safe?
Yeah, I've actually asked that question. It comes with a sort of reasonable set of suggestions, and then you can ask it to find flaws in it, and it will find flaws in it, and sort of keep on the discussion. And then sort of you go along with the reasoning, and then you remember that this is the same model when you asked it with an animal that starts with the same letter as the capital of France, said ferret. It comes up with good things, but the question is that we probably need to think a bit deeper about it.
To keep humanity safe. So we're going to write a question now to GPT-4, asking about this. Safe.
It's going to fix it.
Yeah, it understands your misspellings. But also the backstory here is also the upcoming AI Act that EU is currently drafting and is getting close to being potentially released. We'll see, but it's been going on for a number of years. Okay, so for people that may not be seeing the screen, it's saying it's crucial to avoid potential negative consequences. Here are some recommendations. We should have collaboration when it comes to research in academia and industry. We should have transparency and disclosure. Be transparent about the capabilities. We should be monitoring the biases and ways to mitigate that. We should also moderate and filter the content, make sure it learns the proper things. We should have some kind of access control potentially to not give access to everyone. It seems like a lot of platitudes, to be frank,
Yes.
I think, right?
I was about to say.
And that's
I'm
one
falling
of the
asleep.
interesting things about ChatGPT and GPT-4 is that their knowledge of AI is very limited. It's very sort of layman
Right.
type of thing. If you ask it for something like AI startup, it will come up with very banal ideas. And when you point it out to it, they're like, yeah, okay, that wasn't so good.
Yes.
And the same goes with regulation, that it's like, yeah, it takes the obvious things.
But isn't that the whole limitation with the current architectures? Not being able to generalize and not being creative. If they haven't seen something before, they can't act on it.
That's a
And
very
they-
strong statement.
Yeah.
I think I think it does generalize. The question is just to what extent, I think.
Fair enough.
Right.
Everything is,
And also, I think it's sort of you need to work with it. You need to prompt it. You need to direct it from that local minima it got stuck from, the easiest answer sort of that it goes to. But on the regulation, EU regulation, I would say this analogy. So if ChatGPT and if these are like we're started using cars, the EU AI Act is trying to regulate horses.
Wait, you have such an awesome, metaphors and quotes here.
One-liners, perfect.
Yeah, perfect one-liners. I will have to steal that.
Was that Henry Ford? I'm kidding.
That wasn't the one.
There is.
No, he had the horse
something.
metaphor.
Yeah, people asked for better horses. He built
Yes,
the cars.
yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Okay, to give some background then, the upcoming AI Act, they actually, it's a risk-based approach. So they have some AI use cases that are, forbidden completely, some others that are considered high risk, and they need to implement a lot of extra oversight committees and regulation and technical documentation and be recorded in some kind of database, and it will become much more cumbersome and expensive to develop systems that are considered high risk, basically, right? So that will in some way potentially safeguard humans, hopefully, but also cause potentially some use cases to be much more difficult to develop and also limit innovation. And also the latest version, it's been a number of versions of this AI Act, but the latest one is also saying that these kind of GPT kind of general foundational models are considered, all of them, to be high risk, right?
And that's just so insane, because the first approach that they chose, I think, is a reasonable go for a use case based scenario.
Right. Yeah.
Like, are you doing brain surgery? Yeah, perhaps there should be some rules and oversight.
Yeah, or being like a psychologist. Maybe it's not good that we have an AI if a human is suicidal. It's better to have a human.
But if you're sort of doing birthday greeting cards, and with this, it's a panic reaction. I really hope that this won't go through. It so goes against the basic idea of what the concepts that they built up around the framework.
The intentions are great, of course, but then the question is, should you implement it, as you say, on the technology or on the use case?
No.
I mean, it's kind of strange to say that. I think in one of the initial versions of it as well, they said like any kind of chatbot should be considered high risk. But then if you use a chatbot for consumer, retailer recommendations, is that really high risk?
Yeah.
Or if you use a chatbot to help a suicidal child that may need some advice, then that's a very high risk. It shouldn't be based on the technology of chatbots.
No,
it should be the use case, as you say.
Yeah, 100%.
Why doesn't more people? I think everyone I speak to agrees on this.
Yeah,
but it's just when you have like hardware. If it's a medical hardware, then it needs to be certified because it does medical things.
Yeah. Yes.
So I mean,
are you as annoyed and surprised by the current version of the AI Act, or?
To be honest, I haven't followed it that closely yet. So I'm.
It's a very fun topic to follow.
Yeah, I think we'll need to follow that.
I'm being very ironic, but it's important one still.
Yeah,
right?
it is. It is,
right?
and also the thing now with seeing this as a continuation of GDPR and everything. Yeah. So and the ways people are kind of circumventing GDPR by handling it as a media publication, and then you can publicize personal information. What would be the equivalence here then? So is there a free speech aspect of this that also is possible to use as an implementation? Yeah. So the thing is that what we've seen generally over the past 10 years is that Europe sort of lost the platform game. Yeah. So Asia and the Americas kind of won the platform game. So they created the big platforms, and Europe, for various reasons, didn't do that. So of course there is a risk that we can end up seeing the same bubbles in 5 or 10 years in the AI space, and the big bubbles on the US side and the Asian side. And now of course we have a different geopolitical situation compared to when those bubbles were drawn pre what Russia are doing in Ukraine, and the tension between China and Taiwan, and the tension between the US and China. So I think that will sort of, to me at least, mean that the democratic world is definitely smaller. So can we join, kind of agree on something which is, this is the way we treat AI, and then China will do something different, and Russia, if they do anything, I don't know, but they'll do it also differently. That's an interesting aspect in terms of different parts of the world here, which is relevant again.
Yeah, and I think somehow the scary part is, like you said, Europe has lost the platform play in many ways. I think we've lost the, what we call today AI, the current machine learning, deep learning methods we use. We've lost there also, even though, you look at France, you look at the papers published by Facebook, you look at Hugging Face, you look at Data IQ. So France is actually one country which is producing a lot of, ML talent, but most of them go to the US and in general. But I think the scary part here is that, usually you need some kind of significant event that changes the narrative and perception. So let's take AI and military applications. I think that was a big no-no still 3-4 years ago. At Google, it was a big discussion when they started collaborating with the US military force. And at the end of the day, the employees at Google made a big petition to make Google stop working with the US government and the military. Now we're in a new situation in Europe. Suddenly a company like Helsing that Danalek has funded, like he got a lot of crap when it came out. He invested $100 million into it. Now actually people it's pretty nice to know that Europe is not going to fall completely behind, because suddenly we have this new tectonic shift that made us realize, if we lose this also, Jesus, what's going to happen? Yeah. And I think the scary part here is that, is it required that, say something come from Asia that makes Europe realize, holy shit, now we already lost it. And it's different than other technological revolutions, because this is so much faster than the other ones. Like, we don't have the time to wait for this big thing to happen in Asia or in the US. We should act on it now. And but
it's super interesting that you connect this to our geopolitical security and the security policy, because I strongly feel that, and I coming from the military and all of that, I can feel the tectonic change in perception and attitude towards, the importance of having a military and providing for the territorial integrity and in the end defending our country.
Yeah.
It turns out it wasn't the world we were hoping it was.
No, we were, and me, I was also unfortunately dreaming a little bit, maybe because I was working more with technology than doing the political science thing during the past 20 years. But so definitely the insurance policy is more important than ever right now.
Yeah.
And I think that will change the AI game as well.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is such a fundamental technological shift. It will affect everything.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be debate in society of where we want to go. This is not up to OpenAI or any individual technology company. So there is a need. So how do we bridge the gap of politicians and policymakers who don't understand it?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't understand it.
We can see a potential, but we don't even understand the details of how it works.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's almost like multi-step, because I felt that, just being, digital is the first step. And then the second step is understanding the data-driven aspect, being, working not with documents and understanding what data is. And then moving on to the kind of the cloud and the innovation pace and how you actually make products and do innovation. I've seen that in the armed forces in the way you write specification for a boot and then try to, make specification for IT system. And that doesn't work really. And that insight, from being digital literate, data driven, understanding, the innovation pace, and then over to AI and how the data architecture impacts the way you can do AI. How do we?
But this is running away in such faster. We're talking about things that are occurring now that will automate intelligence at an essentially limitless scale.
Yeah. So many cogwheels,
I mean, the exponential pace of the development in AI is, I think, very few people that do understand. And
I think if we go a bit philosophical, when we started with Peltarion, sort of when anybody would say AGI, I would roll my eyes and sort of steer them towards specific thing. Now I'm at the point that wondering if, like Ray Kurzweil, who was predicting singularity in 2045, if he was being a bit pessimistic.
Yes, and Ray Kurzweil said, I think, two things. One is the singularity in 2045, but he also said that human-level AI will be achieved in 2029.
Okay, that's also...
Is that also pessimistic, you think?
Possibly.
Yeah.
If the past few months are go.
I mean, there are so many examples where AI have passed human in narrow tasks, of course, for a very long time. No question about that. And that is increasing faster and faster. And the question is really, when do we consider AGI to be achieved? In that way?
I think it's going to take a long time for us to really, as a society, say now we have AGI. But I think for certain tasks, I know, like Luka, you're a deep learning pioneer. I'm more from the business side. But I think, looking now at AGI research that's being done, and like I said, I've been now involved with a company that, based on 30 years of research, is developing a new AI architecture, which is closer to AGI. Some might call it AGI, some might not call it AGI, but it's more for specific industrial use cases where you need something that can generalize based on things it hasn't seen before. And I think when you look at, that new race towards AGI, at least personally, I feel that that's still a bit of a blue ocean. We have the foundation models, LLMs. Is that going to take us to AGI? I think it's going to be something completely new.
I think the question is how you define it. And if we go by sort of different types of academic tests and so on, we're fairly close.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, and then it comes, I think essentially this, we will have to get a more nuanced view on what intelligence is. And we should be able to do that because we already do that with humans. There are very big variations just within humans when it comes to
multiple intelligence story of human mind.
Yeah,
there is not a single dimension of the intelligence in some way.
It was, I think, OpenAI's chief scientist said something I thought was really good. He suggested that the language of psychology may be adapted to explain these models. And it's sort of stepping away from the anthropocentrism that we are used to and thinking intelligence is in more general.
I think the conclusion here is, how do we define AGI? I think that's the big challenge here. I think the current systems we are very limited to the training data. That's, you just crank them full with data.
So are humans.
So are humans, but at the same time, say if we can get some kind of AGI level architecture into a car, it would mean that the car should, if it say hypothetical scenario, a UFO lands on the street. It has never seen this object before. Okay, you can have some backstop mechanisms, but say it's something completely new, a new form of mass, something. A human, without having seen it before, we can still take an action on it. Like, we can reason, we can generalize a bit, okay?
I think that if you're talking about sort of very simple object detection methods that are used in self-driving cars, then I agree with you. But if you think like a GPT-4, a model that has a massive amount of knowledge, it was just like, okay, there's a blob in the way I should probably stop. I won't classify it as a very dark reindeer.
Absolutely. And I think this comes down to the use cases, how we define it, because like in many industrial settings for AI, you have circumstances that change completely. And there the current architectures don't work because they haven't seen these situations before. They might actually make the wrong decision. And how can you create a new architecture which is not based on the historical training data, rather on the surrounding, on its capability to actually understand?
But if you look at like the multimodal GPT-4, one of the sort of...
I haven't seen it, that's the problem.
Yeah. But one of the examples that they show is where they show invented objects, and then they ask it to reason about it. Like, what is it? And they make as good a guess as I would have done in sort of general reasoning terms. Yeah. The same way as you can enter a nonsensical text in ChatGPT and ask it to, like, what does this mean? Try to figure it out. And it will come with something that is, well, about as plausible as any human would come up with.
The question is really what's missing, I guess, in some way, to reach some kind of AGI, no matter how we define it. I think from the paper and what you mentioned, Luka, I think there was one picture that they give as an example of a car in New York or something, where there is someone standing on the roof or on the car in some way.
On the backside
and
ironing.
Backside, exactly, ironing with an ironing board and an ironing on it. And they asked, the model, what is strange or what's surprising about this image? Yeah. And it got it. And I mean, if that's not generalizing, what do you really mean? I mean, it is able to understand in some kind of deep way what is normal, what are the objects, and even can reason about it in a rather good way.
It can explain memes.
That's AGI. That's AGI. I think like generalization is the ability for intelligent system to perceive any object or pattern without, recognizing it. Like let's say you take a person who has lived in the Amazonas, never seen a bicycle in their life. When they see it for the first time, they can recognize the patterns. They understand.
Can they? Can a human do that?
A human can do that. It can recognize.
If you've never seen a bicycle before or civilization, can they still understand that it's a bicycle?
Not bicycle, but it can understand the patterns. It can understand the logic of it when it sees it. To some extent, at least. That's for me more AGI, that you can have that reasoning.
I think sometimes people forget that the human brain is severely limited in many ways. I heard someone talking about the limitation of GPT-4 also, but especially perhaps GPT-3 in the ability to multiply large numbers. And of course, you can see it's rather bad at that, and it's better in GPT-4 and some other models that has been, have more logical reasoning, and it can apply some mathematical operation in a rather nice way. And then people say, well, it can't even do what the calculator can do. Well,
Can you?
I think GPT-4 is better than any human today to multiply numbers, right?
Yes. But not perfect, and
Not perfect at all.
which I think is also indicative of the sort of some similarities in the.
Yeah.
And just as humans, if we have this complicated problem, we write Python code, and it also writes Python code.
It can do that as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me at least, I have my way of trying to see what the current AI systems are lacking potentially to become more AGI-like, and these kind of 4 dimensions. I mentioned that a number of times, but one, of course, is generality, and we can see with this kind of large language models, they are of course getting more and more general. They can handle tasks they never been trained for specifically, and you can ask it more or less any task, or not every, but a lot of tasks, like thousands and millions of tasks at least. So they are getting more general, not to the level that human brain is, I don't think, of course, but still say that human that can answer the questions that GPT-4 can answer, a single person that knows everything about, written on the internet. There is not a single human, or even if you had 10,000 humans, they wouldn't be able to answer as many questions.
And how does that also affect its reasoning? Which is also, again, I think this is converging to it's not a human intelligence. It's a different type of intelligence.
Exactly. I think that's the thing. Like when we look at, movies like, say, some Star Wars movie where they have this droid who is like a human, I think that's what we couple AGI with somehow, that you have this robot which can talk with you. It can show emotions. It can, make white lies. It can actually understand when it sees a bike for the first time, and then suddenly the bike is thrown down from the top of a skyscraper and goes into different pieces. It can still understand it's still the same bike, even though it has transformed. And that's more for me the AGI part.
But even I think it was a BARD example of an image. I think I have a 2D image of some object that was doing something, and he asked the question from this 2D image, what will happen to this object? And I don't recall exactly what the image was, but it said it will fall.
Yeah, and that GPT-4 also has a ton of, in the presentation, ton of examples of where they rig up a physical situation where something dynamic will happen, sort of, and ask, and it can predict.
So it understands the basic, at least, physical laws and how objects move in nature or in the physical world that we have in some way.
But I think, Oliver, it's simple. So we take this super intelligence that will emerge, and then we slap on some reinforcement learning with human feedback to dumb it down to human level.
But that's one generality, or one dimensional difference, that we're getting closer to generality and perhaps even getting much more general in some senses, at least, than human have. But the other part is then reasoning, and this, I think, for some reason, is such a sensitive topic, and it's a bit strange to me. But some people, I had a lot of discussions with people saying, transformers can't reason, and then you can think, perhaps not. But it is able to do a lot of things that looks like reasoning, at least.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts? Can GPT reason or not, or can a single transformer model with 96 layers of self-attention blocks reason?
I think Jan LeCun just said that they can't. The transformer based are not going to take us to reasoning and AGI. It's a bit like
not to AGI, but is it fair to say it has some limited form of reasoning potentially, or is it the reasoning at all?
That's philosophical to me.
If it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, that's
right.
fine.
It is.
But here I think also the hybrid AI is interesting, for me at least, when you combine the symbolic AI together with the machine learning based, where the kind of the knowledge graph and the knowledge model makes it very much precise, and use that as a maybe as a last step to kind of filter out the things where you want the high precision. To me, that's interesting. I don't know what you think about that, but to me, I've seen what Pool Party is doing and Expert AI, and even though they are more enterprise oriented, I think it's you get much higher precision and much smaller training data sets.
But it's also the simple, a bit like the ferret problem that I described, the animal. If you ask it to reason about it, rather than just come up with an answer, it comes up with the correct answer. and it actually sort of demonstrates its reasoning line by line. So I would say yes.
Yes, I think it's a type of reasoning similar to generality. It doesn't necessarily is the same type of general models as a human brain is, but it's a different type of general models. And perhaps we can say the same for reasoning. Yeah. It's a different type of reasoning. Or do you think we need symbolic AI to reach higher level of
I've always been attracted to the combo. So, yeah. but I think it matters depending on the use case, I think. So, but on the other hand, I mean, the cool part, I think, is when you talk about symbolic AI, you can kind of explain that, if you explain to people, there is a Mini and a Volvo and a Saab on the car park, and then you can ask it how many cars are there, and you haven't explicitly talked about cars, you just talked about things, and it knows that. So that's super standard basic stuff. But I mean, on the other hand, we've shown that the large language models sort of kind of outcompeted this way of working. So in a way which people didn't expect, really, as I understand it, that we increased the parameter size, even though I know it's not the single thing, but it's apparently it seemed to scale, and people are a bit surprised. But okay, we make it even bigger, and it becomes better, and then we surpassed the idea of the semantic web and all of that cool stuff that.
Yeah. And I gave courses in semantic web for like 20 years ago.
Exactly. I mean,
I think that has passed its
expiration date.
Yeah, but it's still being used.
Chomsky's language theories.
He's still in that camp, though.
Yeah, but it's still being used in terms of that both Google and Microsoft have knowledge graphs that you use to kind of inform kind of output from the machine learning part. So it's not dead. I would say it's matured. Actually,
true. I agree that it could be a rapid way, especially when we are dealing with limited context with AIs, that's to feed them very specific information. That's the point.
And maybe we can automate that as also in a way. So I don't know.
And just to continue on your point as well, I think it's a valid point. And if you take like AlphaZero or something that's playing chess or Go or StarCraft or whatnot, they have combined the deep learning model with additional reasoning or Monte Carlo tree search kind of things, some way to iterate or take a number of steps and then figure out, what was the best path to take by exploring a number of, steps forward in some kind of tree search method. And that's actually similar to Transformers' first model, if you remember, with doing translation. They have, I forgot the name now, help me, Luka, as well. When they do the different word by word autoregressive creation, they have these kind of different paths, that they're exploring. I lost the name for it, but it's basically a tree search as well. Yeah. And they're trying to take a number of parallel paths in seeing which translation is actually looking the best. So it actually did have a tree search even in the original Transformer paper, and a tree search
beam search.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So I mean that if you think just a deep learning model by itself, and it's not allowed to be combined with some kind of hard-coded, rules like tree search, then I think we can significantly speed up the way to do reasoning by adding this kind of rules to it, right? And I think it's a bit surprising, even if you take like reasoning or reinforcement learning in general, like AlphaZero or something, that is simply trying to take different paths to win a game of chess or something, which is also some form of reasoning itself, right? Why don't they combine that more with large language model? To me, that's kind of strange. If they would have some kind of tree search and add that as some kind of type 2 reasoning on top of it.
If you haven't used Bard, so Bard produces not one answer,
right? Different drafts that's in it,
yeah. So it may be
getting closer to that, perhaps, yeah.
But I feel sort of that what has happened with large language models, that this is a step function compared to the deep learning that we're used to with sort of the stuff that we did at Plutarion, essentially, sort of that, which again was a step function from traditional ways of doing things, and generally,
so step function in like you said, like inflection point that significantly improve the performance to do some.
Yes. in capability. So the question is always there, like, do you integrate it with the older methods, or do you just like for instance the knowledge graph things? It makes perfect sense today combining because these models do have a very limited active memory, meaning that the more relevant information you can stick to it, the better. But if you consider unlimited memory, where it just has access to all of it all at once, then...
But to me, it also, I've seen that with researchers a lot, when coming from the business side, is that there is this dream on the other technical side that they want to automate everything. So you just have to do this, and then you get the answer. And I'm always saying, well, I want something that interacts with me and follow me through a process. And then my input becomes input to the whole thing, instead of trying to automate everything in one step. And I think
want to have human in the loop.
But not maybe want to, but at least leverage that as long as it's needed. So because we are doing things in the process, we are doing it in a multi-step way. We are also, as humans, by doing it, adding new context, adding new data, instead of seeing it as somebody else need to do it for us. Why not leverage the stuff that we are, the work we are doing, and then use that to inform the thing?
It depends also on the use case. Our specific case, for instance, with King, there are trillions of decisions being made every day for players, which was like, it's impossible for a human to actually interact and have any meaningful impact. But then there are other more strategic decisions that are where you definitely want to say things.
And also, perhaps to add another component that is potentially missing in AI systems of today and in GPT is, and then referring a bit to Jan LeCun here as well, and the JEPA paper, or I'm not sure what the proper term or the title was, it was something like the path to AGI or something. And one of the things that he has is speaking about this reasoning, having an actor, having a perceptor part, having a configurator, but he also has a world model. And and with word model, I mean basically like a world state, saying, this is currently the way that we see the world right now, some kind of state model that we have of the world. And of course, the GPT, at least in the original sense, is trained until 2021 type of data, and then it doesn't update, continuously in the same way. So this is potentially that's missing, at least from the current ChatGPT type of models.
You have
right?
Bing.
Yeah, Bing Chat. Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
No, I was actually going to say that Jan LeCun is quite becoming the successor to Schmidhuber.
Ooh, that was also a strong statement. But yeah, okay. But before we go there, that we can take that after work. I think that's an interesting discussion, and you're probably right, perhaps. But still, we can see that having what I mean basically with this is that of course we have the model is trained for months and months with millions of dollars to be able to train this model. Then it stays fixed. But it does, at least in ChatGPT, not in GPT-3, but in ChatGPT, it has the user model or the user state. So in a single discussion, it does update the user state, if you see what I mean, right?
Yeah.
But then if you go to another user session, it's lost and you start from scratch every time. It doesn't really combine into some kind of world state. But as you said then, of course, with Bing Chat and also in Bard, right? It does integrate with some kind of search engine. And I guess a search engine could be considered to be a world state. Yeah. It's constantly being updated with all the changes to all the web pages that you see.
But I disagree a little bit because to me the web is the surface web, and that's what you can index. Mm-hmm. And then you have everything which is behind a paywall or a login, the deep web, and then you have the dark web, of course. That's a different thing. Yeah. But I mean, so to me, sometimes I feel that we are only focusing on this public internet thingy, whereas we have a lot of data which is personal to us and personal to your company or whatever.
Yes. Or to our lives.
Exactly, yeah. So I wonder if the...
Agreed. I mean, it's so much more data, but at least it's better than not having anything, right?
100%. And I think here, you hit the nail on the head a bit. That's the whole problem also with the LLMs. They are reinforcing many of our biases also. And we have these issues with the training data, indexing the internet and everything. And I think, the whole term AI, I think Reid Hoffman had a good post about this. Like, maybe we shouldn't utilize the word artificial intelligence. It's more what we're utilizing now is amplified intelligence. We're taking, human experience from a certain forum, in this case, the internet, and then putting it through these models and utilizing it to amplify us right now. And I think for me at least, it's not AGI. It's just amplifying human behavior and how humans are on the internet, and maybe some book corpus, and then we have the human in the loop. But it's not...
And possibly polarized as well, because what you put on the internet is either things you're really proud of, or you're behaving like an ass. And those are the things we see,
Yeah, and people who get suppressed are not on the internet.
Yeah.
I would say it still is an intelligence in its own right. So it's not just about amplifying. And I think also it's one of the questions that is sort of existentially interesting, is sort of where we are taking this and how far we let it.
So if we do all this,
But I need to say one thing about the world state, because the space race, I think we need to include that as well.
Okay.
Because that means that we can soon have a real-time picture of the Earth. Because the cost of putting stuff to lower Earth orbit is going so much down because SpaceX and everything. So, which means that you can have real-time monitoring on every place of the world all the time. And then that means that you have to that resolution, whatever it is, 1 meter or half 4 decimeters or something, whatever it is, then we can have a world state. So that's interesting on that level.
And perhaps you mentioned SpaceX, and we haven't even mentioned Elon Musk, and that's surprising. But he has,
good, I think.
He's busy at Twitter, so it's okay.
But isn't that interesting? Potentially if he has SpaceX and Starlink with all the satellites, running around the Earth. You also have cars running around all the streets with cameras in it.
Yes.
He also has Twitter and get also all the data about social media and kind of news outlets.
X.com, the only app or whatever you call it, the single app.
Should perhaps go there, but it's kind of scary when someone has that much data available to him, right?
Especially if it's Elon Musk.
I agree with Kara Swisher here. He should go back to SpaceX and Tesla and focus on that instead of. But that's to me it hasn't gone better. It's gone worse.
I want to do a quick fire to you guys who are very deep into the current. So when we talk about AGI, and I know it depends how you define AGI and situational use cases. But do you guys think with the current architectures we have, deep learning architectures and transformers, LLMs, do you think this is the approach that will get us there?
Stuff are missing, for sure.
That will get us there. We're talking about the robot butlers who you have at home, or will it be something new? Architecture-wise, we need to invent a new approach.
I'm leaning towards thinking that sort of the type of mechanism that's required for intelligence can be fairly generic, that it's sort of not super independent. I don't think that current transformers are an optimal way or an efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
What happens when we scale them more and more? It could work out that we have a very inefficient but sufficiently general structure enough to essentially run anything in it.
And we need to round off kind of soon here, but my short 2 cents on this as well. Of course, we need more thing than simply the transformer models at least. I think, Jan LeCun and his JEPA paper outlines a number of interesting parts that are missing, like the world state, like having actors and agreements, having some configurator, and we have the perception part. I actually, one other part that I am having a big hope for that's not being spoken about that much is neuromorphic computing. So going from this kind of von Neumann architecture, more from a hardware side, to having both memory and weights at the same place, these kind of memristors, because there are these kind of implementations today, which is much more similar to neurons. I think that will significantly improve the energy efficiency and ability to build these kind of systems. Do you have any thoughts about this?
No. That was new to me, so please explain more.
But in general, what do you think is missing? Is it sufficient with transformers, deep learning, or what's necessary to reach more AGI, you think?
I'm always for combining things. I think innovation is not only inventing things, but combining things in new ways. I think that's the way we seem to solve problems, and that's the way I think of things as well, to finding the pieces of the puzzle and putting together in a new way. So, and it's, I think it's, you will beat me for this, but the first iPod, for instance, came together because there were different things, the hard drive got smaller and there were kind of developments that kind of went into that architecture that became possible to have 1,000 songs in your pocket. Yeah.
And just to be open, I do think Apple's innovations are amazing. I just don't like the values of the company, but that's another story.
That's another podcast.
I adore the values.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Yep. Every time I go into these discussions with experienced people like you guys who have worked with the current deep learning approaches and architectures, you start talking about AGI and maybe we need something completely new. People can get a bit offended and feel that you're attacking them. And for me, nothing is binary. I think everything will have its place, and AGI is such a broad term. Like, I don't think anything will render, or for sure something at some point, but if you look into the near-term future, next 10, 15 years, nothing will render deep learning obsolete. But I think there will be new architecture for new use cases.
That will complement or replace, but...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's so sort of, both Anders and I who have worked with this quite a long time. I thought 20 years ago, would you have guessed that backpropagation would take us here?
No way.
Exactly.
It's very fun. We have so many more topics to cover, but the time has been flying away, so I think we have to round off a bit here. As a last question, perhaps each of you could just mention a bit what's happening next, privately or professionally, coming weeks or months. Do you want to start, Oliver?
Sure. No, I'm involved with a few new startups that I've invested in areas where I feel I have some kind of information arbitrage, where I met people in the industry. I've discussed this. So working with cloud FinOps right now, working with naturally large language models. And right now, my focus is on finding awesome entrepreneurs, early stage, pre-seed, seed, support them in creating transformational category-defining companies. And I think the whole discussion around AI and AGI is really interesting, because for me, it's still a few steps ahead. But I think it's, as an investor, you have to stay a bit ahead of the curve all the time. Right. So, LLMs, everybody knows about them now. Like my dad speaks about ChatGPT, and he's, retired businessman. I think that speaks volume that, we've crossed the chasm with transformers and large language models now. So I think what is interesting also besides that is what is next, coming next in the coming 5 years.
Yeah. Cool. Luka, what's happening next in your life?
So I'm busy organizing the AI center building at King. So it's hiring a lot of people, building up that, and then also figuring out sort of my original sort of scope of ambition was essentially bringing reinforcement learning as the sort of main decision engine around the games interact with the players. But things are changing so rapidly, I have to figure out how to sort of get these new things in as well.
Cool. Yeah, sounds very exciting. Alexandra?
The thing spinning in my head is the startup, of course. So a lot of
launching in 2-3 weeks. Or?
Yeah, we are doing internal testing then with external people, but that we trust, and then we will launch it for public beta testing a little bit later on. But I'm super excited because it feels like I'm back in the space where, work with languages and images and all of that stuff that I love, analyzing. So my political science part of me and my technical side can kind of merge, and then being able to develop this product and trying to build a company, getting the team together, having lunches and discussing who will be the co-founder and what's your role and all that important but difficult stuff. That's what's on top of my head the next couple of weeks, and super excited.
We should
Fun
talk.
times. Yeah, exactly. If you have some connections here. Best of luck for that, Alexandra. It sounds very exciting, and best of luck of all of you. And thanks once again for coming here and speaking about this very exciting topic. I was still, surprised when we realized, GPT4 was launched on Tuesday. It feels like 2 weeks ago for me because I've been reading so much about it. But it's moving so fast. And
but it was last Tuesday.
Last Tuesday.
Oh, it was. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Last Tuesday.
So it's a week and a half.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I wasn't that off.
Exactly.
Good.
But
then you still had Copilot X coming up, Bard coming up, and
Alpaca same week.
Alpaca.
Yeah.
It's exploding. It's
Crazy.
truly an exponential time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we thought it was crazy 2017.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I thought one thing was rather interesting. It was sort of we had it in like 2012 to 13, 14. We had these image models like and sort of it went very rapidly, and then nothing. Yeah. And then came BERT and the language models, and then it felt also like nothing. And then now they exploded.
Yeah. And generative AI is coming now to a large extent, right? And exploding once again. Fun times. It's interesting time. Or what is it the Chinese say? May you live in interesting times. And we certainly are, right? Yeah. Cool. Thanks you again very much. And let's continue with the after work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure being here.